We're gonna start with a pretty clean slate as far as mount goes. Like I don't have any upper body control yet, or anything like that. Okay? He's got his arms pretty tight. He's not offering me anything. Okay? So we're gonna use this to set the basic premise for what we call a crossface and underhook control. Okay? So what we want to do here first is solve this problem where we have no space between the elbows and the ribs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a palm down grip on his wrist here. Okay? My other palm on his elbow, and I'm going to situate my body behind this, and I'm essentially going to do like a push-up motion. Okay? That's going to help me start to resist against basically his shoulder here. All right? So if I just push like this and Ramiro stays tight, see nothing's really happening. That's because I'm pushing with my arm. But now when I get this grip, watch, I'm going to push with my whole body. Suddenly this starts to weaken and separate. Okay? Now I'm separating this with the intention of getting an underhook, okay? Sometimes we can't pin this. We've looked at this in the past with back takes. Right now I'm just taking enough space right here to get my elbow under, okay? Guys, when you get your elbow under, especially from like a beginner perspective, we're in the basics class, right? Keep this elbow up and active, okay? Something you don't want to do here right away is necessarily bring your elbow in tight. You could overwrap this, potentially roll you this way, you don't have any balance, okay? The better you get, the easier that is to counter, but something you should be aware of right away. Right. So as I do this, I'm gonna keep my hand on the floor. I'm gonna try to keep my elbow off of the floor, okay? Now from here, I need to get this arm under his neck and get my fingers hooked into his armpit for the crossface. Now, a lot of times it is that easy, okay? Sometimes, however, he'll keep his head really tight to the mat. So from here, what we can do with the underhook is actually grab his head and lift the head on the underhook, take slack out and punch this deep, okay? And then from here, once I take the slack out, that's when I'm gonna grab his armpit with my little fingers. And we're just gonna stop here, okay? See if you can get your arm out. See if you can wrap it. Perfect. See if you can turn this way. Guys, remember side control from last week? The whole purpose of a crossface is to basically twist the spine, all right? So you will have a little bit of mobility here, but you shouldn't be moving too freely. An underhook, okay? Get a palm down wrist pin. We're starting to do a push-up motion here. You get an underhook, keeping my elbow wide, kind of dynamic here, not too tight, not too loose, okay? And remember, we can use this hand to start lifting his head to get our middle fingers under the armpit, okay? And make sure here, again, just like last week, your shoulder is trying to touch your own hand. Now again, it looks like, hey, I'm just pushing like this, but guys, really like, this is just the beginning. Your driving force here should be your entire upper body. So I'm not just doing this, like really if you get here and you feel it lock, now it's time to start pushing with your chest too. Like really try to lay on this arm. Okay, that'll really start to weaken the shoulder more. Okay, furthermore, other things he might be doing here that we can manipulate. Some of you are locking your hands together. It's very common here. Okay, I'm always going to recommend in this scenario that you go for the bottom hand because it's more exposed. It's going to be a lot harder to strip the top hand. Okay. Other thing too, it doesn't always need to start with a push, guys. You can create momentum too by locking your hands. You can always pull up and then push down. Okay. Way to get the shoulder like unlocked a little bit. Another thing that I'm not going to recommend quite as much right now because like you guys might not make a lot of friends with this. Okay. In the gi, there's a submission where we put the thumb in the collar and drive the forearm in. Okay. It's kind of a low percentage submission, but what it is good for is to make the bottom person move. Okay. So if he's just sitting here, you know, in that praying motion, we can use what's called a reverse crossface. Put some pressure in here. And a lot of times they're going to move their hands for you. A big focus of the last couple of years has been taking people's backs from here and getting arm triangles, okay, which are probably two of the easier options here for any body type, any size, any age, so on and so forth. Okay? So if you guys remember a lot of the things we looked at here, okay, pushing the elbow down, okay, sometimes in different ways, pulling this elbow across, getting to what we call a technical mount where we're driving to the side. That's our back take territory. Okay. And then from the technical mount, it's kind of roundabout to what we're doing right now. This could lead to what we're doing right now as well. Okay. So when I get a technical mount, he brings his elbow above his head to escape, that gives me the underhook. And now we're right back in the same spot that we're working right now. Okay? We're gonna climb from our crossface underhook control essentially. So what I'm gonna do is, if I can't start bringing his elbow to the other side of my head, or I don't want to, I'm actually gonna take the underhook and I'm gonna bring it to the other side, okay? So now we're starting to encapsulate his head and his arm here, okay? Right around this point, you guys should start thinking about climbing your knees up nice and high. And then pinching, okay? Now a big thing I'm doing here is I want to try to isolate this arm on this side of his head. So I'm going to pull this wrist out of the way, put my head on the mat, and now we'll have some good pressure on the shoulder, okay? So this week, this is essentially going to be our setup for the mounted triangle. Get that pin, okay? Find my underhook. Get my crossface, all right? So if you won the last drill, you were right here. Okay. Now, guys, really important. This is a huge detail here. Okay. I see all of you have trouble with this a lot when you're not white belt to black belt. Everybody has trouble with this. Okay. Keep this arm resistant. Don't let me bring it over your head. Okay. Remember how we pinned the arm in the first place. We didn't use just our arms. We used our entire upper body. So guys, watch. Go ahead. Resist. Now watch my upper body. I gotta start to drive my chest behind that too. That's gonna be much stronger than just your arm, okay? Then it's gonna be much easier to get this arm around his head, all right? Now from here, if he's kind of dangling this arm in front here, we can briefly take the hand, push this in front, bring our head down, and then re-grip here. All right, so this is where we stopped. We're gonna be going for the triangle on the far side. And it really depends on what Ulysses is doing with his arm. We're gonna look at two primary methods this week, okay? It's just gonna be like close guard. Is his hand between my knees or is it on the outside, okay? Typically, if he's doing the right things, it's gonna be on the inside here, so we're gonna look at this first, all right? At this point, I do need my hand to start attacking his arm. The good news is you still have this single chest wrap here. Guys, when you're holding this, you should be pulling in with this claw grip and really pinching your elbow to the shoulder, okay? Just like a regular crossface. Okay. That should be sufficient to hold him here, okay? Now, when I'm ready to triangle him, I'm gonna take this hand, I'm just gonna stuff his elbow so his arm's not moving, and I'm just gonna slide my knee over it, okay? Now, when I'm ready to go for the rest, I'll go to his wrist and slide my hips over. Now we're in the same position, just above his shoulders. So if he starts to move here, this still should be extremely stable, guys, okay? Now, to start to lock up the triangle, this is gonna be almost identical to last week. I'm gonna start to build up, and remember guys, to get a good bite on the triangle, we need to lift the head off the ground, okay? As I lift the head, I'll shift my weight to the non-choking knee, straighten my leg, and then bite under the neck here, okay? Now, in terms of tightening this, guys, very important, you need to grab your shin to get consistency out of this. Grab your shin and do your best to pull this leg above his shoulder. If you do that, it's gonna be tight, okay? Next thing, locking. I wanna start to rotate perpendicular, and to really lift him off the ground, I wanna bring my head and my elbow to the floor, so I get a lot of space to lift here. Now it's gonna be an easy thing to put my knee in front of the shoulder, and then lock the triangle, okay? Now from here, I'll just return, and just like last week, I'll start to make that tourniquet motion. In this scenario, Mike's framing on my hips, or his hand's just generally in the middle, okay? I'm gonna find his elbow, step over, stuff his hand, okay? And now start to lift. Make sure that hamstring is jabbing into his neck here as you settle, okay? As you settle, make sure you're starting to grab your shin and you're striving to pull it past his shoulder. At any point too, just like last week, we can look to pass this arm over too, okay? Head on the floor, elbow on the floor, lifting, shoulder in front of the neck. There's my bite, knees on the ground, and we can start to lock. You guys need to get this leg in front of the shoulder, okay? You're going to lock up while you're in mount, you're letting it get down here. Again, you could go to things like arm locks, but you're not gonna choke him like this, okay? You guys probably felt too when you lock like this, he's literally laying on your foot, and it's really uncomfortable, right? So make sure as you're cutting here, this is always going in front of the shoulder. Okay, see I can't see his shoulder anymore, it's just his head and his arm. So Let's just compare that versus the top. Alright, so let this step over. Alright, so right here, this is what I'm talking about. This is why it's so important to lift the head, guys. Alright, watch. Guys, don't forget too, when you shoot this through, don't put a bend in your knee so there's space right here. Okay? Shoot it through and bite your hamstrings to the neck. Okay, that's the first step of getting a triangle tight. Now when you guys are here, you're doing stuff like this. Ramiro will tell you, it's still kind of tight, but I'm putting a lot of pressure on his shoulder now versus his neck. So guys, remember, if I could get it past here, I would. Okay? Now you see it's the same as when I was on bottom. I can't see his shoulder. That's a good telltale sign that I have like a full purchase on the neck for the choke here. Does that make sense? The more I get here, the less it is on his neck. A big kick over like this week, okay? We don't need to do that this time. Could you? Yes. But also, is it a huge risk? Yes. Okay. All right, so here, we're leaning, we get this over, okay? We're just gonna keep focusing on the exact same thing here, guys, okay? So get our knees up. We'll assume his wrist is in the middle for right now, okay? Again, we'll step the knee first, pop the wrist, and then again, start to lock up here. Okay, guys, at this point, if you wanna try to get more reps on the triangle, feel free. I'm just gonna go use this week to go over some of the options here that not as common as the triangle in my opinion, but very supplemental, okay? First one's not a very distant second either, okay? So we're gonna look at the arm bar from the triangle right away. So triangle arm bar, if you will. Guys, the cool thing here, especially, we talked about this a little bit last week, if you're not as flexible, you could get away with this as early as like just having your knees pinched here. See, I don't have a lock. Don't necessarily recommend this, okay? An actual lock is gonna have more control, but it is possible right here, okay? So if you guys do have the means, especially to chain the choke with the joint locks here, do lock your triangle, okay? If you're doing all this for drilling purposes for now, so he's not miserable right now, you know, just keep this a little bit looser. Okay? All right, so for the arm bar, if I ever feel that he's reaching up or his elbows relax here, okay, we can take a grip on the thumb just like we would for a regular arm bar, okay, and start to look to turn his palm away from us, okay. From here, that's what's really going to start to lock out the elbow. Now, just like a good arm bar here, the angle is perfect because the fulcrum's right here. I want to go to my hip. I don't want to go straight up like this, okay? Not to mention here, again, if we sit straight up, if he bucks really hard, he'll off balance us just enough to disrupt the finish, right? So you guys see, I'm really leaning forwards as I do this, okay? Again, if I need to, I'll go down to my elbow. Now from here, you can start to pull in, okay? And if you guys feel really stable or he's not spazzing out, you can go both hands here to get more leverage to break his elbow. So we hop the elbow, we hop the wrist, we slide our knees up. Remember guys, really lift the head so you get a good purchase here, okay? If you want to lock here right now, feel free. If your partner is not liking it, you know, give them a little room to breathe. Okay, you can just stop right here if need be for drilling purposes. Okay. Does it need to be as dramatic as me going into my elbow? No. The focus here, guys, is that your weight is just going forwards, okay? Just so he's not off balancing me. Okay, I'll take the remaining hand, I'll pull the thumb in, turn the palm out, and then from here, we can look to finish. Okay. Guys, remember, again, this is just a symptom of us drilling this with being nice to each other in mind. Look at where my knee is, it's not covering the shoulder. Watch. It's not quite as tight anymore, right? Now watch when, I'm gonna do this very carefully. It's because the fulcrum's not present. Just by sliding my knee in front of the shoulder, then the pressure starts going through his elbow. You guys understand? So that's really important here. Keep this in mind leading to the next techniques, okay? So now, sorry, I'll go a little looser. Now we're gonna look at if his elbow's more bent, okay? Let's compound this with him locking his hands too, which people will do here a fair amount. Okay, we usually look at this from like the rear triangle from the back, okay? So I need a push-pull reaction here to separate his grip, and it's gonna start a chain reaction of 2 submissions here, okay? It depends on what he gives me. So the inside hand, that's my left hand, I'm gonna C-grip his wrist the same way we pinned it earlier, okay? This hand I'm gonna go on the outside of my arm and I'm gonna make a bicep curl. For balance, again, we can always go back to our head here. Now, I'm gonna start to shift everything towards my far knee to break his grip. If he tries to lock his hands again, it's gonna be very difficult. If he lets me keep going, look at his arm, it's L-shaped, it's gonna finish an Americana here, okay? So as I go, I'm gonna push my right hip through his elbow. That'll finish the lock, okay? Building a game plan here, guys. Again, if Ulysses straightens his arm, I'm not necessarily gonna push this down so I can go for an Americana and let him lock his hands. If his arm goes up, I'm gonna armbar him, okay? If he locks his hands, it's gonna be really hard to separate for an armbar here. Usually we've gotta drop back to do that. We don't want him to do that from here necessarily. So I'm just gonna focus on this grip break. Grabbing the wrist, hooking his arm. You guys see I'm using my knees and my head for balance here. Okay, and then from here I'm hinging to separate his grip, okay? If he tries to lock his hands, it's very, very difficult, okay? Now I just keep pulling. If you guys need more leverage at this point, once you decide that he can't lock his hands, you can use your hands now. And pull the wrist, and your hip is literally going through the elbow. Now, this arm, okay? Usually this is gonna be pretty intuitive, especially if you like triangles, okay? However, it can be confusing because we talked about, I'm doing this entry mostly if his hand is somewhere positioned between my legs, right? If Ulysses' arm is out, which it will be a fair amount, okay? And I go to like stuff his elbow here, keep it out. Yeah, I'm definitely not gonna go around his arm, okay? But look guys, there's a lot of space here, so we're just gonna go over his arm instead if this is the case, okay? Now when we do this, okay? I don't want his arm moving so that my knee can't come over, so think of the beginning of class. Let's get that wrist pin again if we need to, and then slide our shin over, okay? Now, the rest of the technique just involves me getting my foot over it. So in order to do that, we just need to draw a circle with our lower body. So as I lift his head, I just slide that foot by, okay? And from here, it's that same shift into the triangle, okay? Now guys, remember, I know we're being nice to each other, but you guys felt with that Americana too, just like the armbar, if the hip is not right here, nothing's gonna happen there. Now I have a fulcrum, okay? Now, you can lock up again. There will be this element here, put my head up so you guys can see, where as you start to pull this, they resist. And it's just enough so that it can't break his arm, okay? This is the perfect opportunity to wrist lock somebody. Okay, so from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let go of his wrist and I'm going to cover his knuckles. Okay, as soon as I get that fold, my other hand's going to come over the top and I'm just going to jam straight through my hip. Wrist locks are predicated on the same thing. Whenever you wrist lock somebody, their elbow needs to be on a swivel, and that's where you can put effective pressure on the wrist. Okay, a solution for the entry and the solution for the Americana. Thank you. Now guys, I'm not saying you can't do this. You will be able to a lot, but move your arm around. Like, just like punch it up. Yeah, that's difficult. How about now? It's very important. And just keep sliding to get your foot over it too, okay? Shift, and then we're back in the same position, okay? Knees covering. We'll go for that same grip break we just did, okay? Remember, head on the floor for balance. Breaking. Now, his job is to arm wrestle me here a little bit. So I can't fully extend his arm to the direction I need it. So instead here, I'm going to take the hand off the wrist, cover his knuckles, bring the other hand up, then just jam it through the hip to finish the wrist lock. Thing here too, in any entry, I said this last week, as we're stepping over, if you're really inflexible, okay, you can look at options where you play here, not bringing the leg under the neck all the way, and looking for things like S-mount style arm bars. Okay?